Welcome to another Prairie Creek Library craft time. Today we're going to be finger knitting a 16 by 16 pillow. So the first thing we do to start is we want to, let's talk about the yarn. You're going to want a 10-ounce yarn and about 32 yards of it. Okay, if you're going to work with a smaller yarn, like mine is an 8-ounce, then I'm going to need a little more than. Okay, so be aware when you're purchasing what you're purchasing there. Okay, so I'm going to take my yarn and I'm going to begin by making a slip knot. To make a slip knot, I'm folding this feeder yarn from my ball. See, I have it crossed over the top, and then I'm going to push that through the center of the loop that I formed, and that's going to make my slip knot. Okay, I'm going to do it again. So I'm going to cross that over. Again, this feeder one is on the top and this end tail is underneath. Then I'm going to feed through the bottom and pull up. And that is my slip knot. Then my slip knot is also going to serve as my first chain. So to chain, you're going to chain 9 to begin this pillow. And all I'm going to do is the same as a slip knot. I'm going to push that feeder thread through and pull up. You don't need it tight. You're going to be working with that loop. So go ahead and leave that a couple inches in the loop. You can see that I can fit a couple fingers in there. Okay. So I'm going to chain 9. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, and all I'm doing is pushing that up through that loop and pulling it up through the previous loop and pulling it. Okay, until you get 9 chains. Okay, once you get your 9 chains, then I would stretch that across your pillow length and make sure that you can go from end to end. So you're about halfway covering across that pillow. Okay, at this point, if you needed to make another chain to reach that, especially if you're using a smaller yarn, then go ahead and do that. Okay, so on mine, I am using a smaller yarn. I only have an 8-ounce, so I'm going to do that extra loop on here. Okay, then you're going to begin, once you have your 9 chains, you're going to begin to build onto that and actually do your knitting. So here's my feeder length here. I'm going to pull that through again, but this time I'm going to pull that loop up. Now, I will say it's easier if you take your feeder yarn and go across in the direction you're going to work, okay? That'll help you keep track of your loops. All right, remember that if you have the 10-ounce, you're going to have 9 loops. For me, I'm going to make sure I have 10 at all times. Okay, so there's 2. And all I'm doing is going into this top section of my chain, and I'm pushing that feeder line through it. Okay, and you're going to want your loops to be about 1.5 to 2 inches. Okay, again, I'm just going through that top of that chain. You can see here the top loop of the chain, and I'm pushing that feeder through there. Okay, and then I'm just pulling it up. Top of my chain, pull it through and up. Top of my chain, pull it through and up. Top of my chain, feed it through, pull it up. Be sure when you're pulling that you're not pulling so hard that you're pulling these other ones smaller. I do check that along the way. And then again, I'm going to finish off, and then I'm going to count and make sure that I have my initial chain. So if you have that 10-ounce yarn, you're going to count and make sure you have 9. If you have the 8-ounce yarn, you're going to count and make sure that you have 10. Okay, and you can see the loop. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I'm on 8 and I have 9 to 10 there. I have 2 to finish. That one I made a little bit tight. It's a little harder to get through, so you can see why you want to leave it loose, because your fingers do need to get in there and work. Okay, so now I have that first row of 10 done. And let me also show you this. You can see that I'm going back and checking my loops, and you can count them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I have 10. Okay, so my second line, I'm going to take this feeder, and again, I'm going to go across that way because that's the way that I'm going to be working. And then I'm going to do the same thing. I'm just going to pull that up, go to the next one, pull it up. Okay, you can see that. Pull it up. And then I was going to show you, okay, when you're doing this, make sure when you're pulling up that you see 2 straight lines, that your loop is not twisted. See here, I don't see the 2 straight lines because my yarn has been twisted. So you want to make sure that you stay straight. That'll keep your rows straight, and it'll make your piece look neater. Okay, so I'm going to finish off this line, and then I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to go back and count and make sure that I have my 10 loops. Okay, for some of you it'll be 9, depending on your yarn. I know I've said that several times, but I make sure you understand that. Okay, then I can go back, and here's my piece, and I can count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I have all my loops, and then we're going to repeat. We're going to go back this way, work across this way again, and then we'll swing back, and you're going to make about 28 of those rows. Now, here's the thing. When you get to 28, you are not necessarily just finished, because depending on the thickness of your yarn and depending on how big you made your loops, your pillow form may be a little different. Okay, so let me pull up one here that I have. Okay, so your next step then is to measure it over your pillow form. You want to make sure that your pillow is covered, and mine looks like it's all done. And so then we are ready to go to the next step. Okay, when you get ready to do your last row, then you're going to take and make sure that your loops, you can see that I formed my loops just a little bit longer than the previous loops that I was working with. And the reason for that is you're going to have to do a lot of manipulating for this last step. Okay, so I have ensured that my pillow cover fits over my pillow form. So the next thing I'm going to do, if you're left-handed, you'll want to start from the left side. If you're right-handed, probably from the right side. So you're going to take this first loop, and then you're going to feed the second one through it. So all I'm doing is taking the next loop, feeding it through. Just sticking it through the center and pulling that one up, so you can see it's forming a chain. And this is just finishing off that last top row to give your pillow that finished look. Okay, so you can see that I've gone all the way across, and that's how it looks finished. Okay, now that you're finished with your pillow, the next thing you're going to do is take your end and go across. 1, 2, that will be this side. 1, 2, that would be your top. 1, 2, that would be other side. So you need at least this much left to go across that many times. Now, if you don't have that much, see if you have at least like that you could go 4 times, and that'll do your sides, and we'll talk about the top later on. Okay, now that I have that top finished, I'm going to go ahead and take this end loop, and I'm going to feed that tail through there. And I'm going to pull that tight to form sort of a knot. Okay, then I'm going to take it and measure out my 2 lengths that I'm going to need for the seam. And I'm going to clip that off. And now I'm going to begin the seam on the side. So I have my cover formed. Let me get it all laid out together. Okay, I'm going to turn it sideways so you can see what I'm doing a little bit. And so then I am going to put this tail through this top loop here. And I'm going to be working by going from the bottom. So I'm going to go up through this. And then I'm going to find the counterpart down here. And I'm going to go down. And I'm going to complete the whole side that way by going up and then back down. You're going to want to pull it tight as you go because you're not going to be able to tighten it up later on. Okay, as I'm coming to the end of this row, I'm still feeding through my tail, finishing up this row, doing the same thing, just going down through the bottom, up through the top. And then when I get to the corner, I'm going to have a piece left over, and you're just going to hide that in, just kind of thread it through here and hide it within your pillow. Okay, now once you've completed that side, then you're going to again take your yarn and you're going to measure out 2 more lengths and cut that off. And then you can just flip your project over and you're going to do the same thing. You're going to go down the other side. Okay, so I'm just going to stick this in. And then I'm going to go up and down just like I did earlier. Remember that you're pulling it tight. So that you don't have to do it later. You want to pull it tight as you go. This yarn's not going to be the type that you could pull the end and tighten it all down. So you want to make sure you're pulling it, tightening it as you go, connecting those sides. Okay, then you can see that I'm at the end of the second side, and you're going to do the same thing. You can just go ahead and hide this thread. On that one I cut pretty long, so I probably could just cut that off, but for right now I'm going to stick it down in here. Okay, and then your next step, you're now at the top. Next thing you're going to do is insert that pillow insert into your cover. Okay, once you have the insert in, then you just have this last side to seal up. Now, you can leave it open. You could put buttons on and fasten it that way, just enough to close it up so that you can take it out and wash the cover when needed. Or you can go ahead and follow through what we were doing before on the side and just go ahead and start weaving your last thread through there. Now, I will say that if you are running out of your yarn, if you did not have enough to do the 3 pieces that you needed to seam, then a good way to cut back on that would be to go ahead and use the buttons or leave this open. I think the buttons would be a good idea because then you could just unfasten it. But for our purposes here, I'm going to go ahead and seal this up the way that we did the sides. And then once I get to the end, I will go ahead and hide that tail just like we did before. And I'll hide my beginning tail over here. And there's your completed project, ready for you to use and enjoy.